Hey everybody, welcome. Thanks for watching. We're back on the Injured 25 YouTube channel. Back on today with film scholar Katy Burrell. Um, we're talking about The Conjuring 3, which just dropped on in theaters and on HBO Max. I watched it mostly on my laptop. I this based on the way that uh, everything kind of worked out this weekend. Um, do you recommend? And Katie, I didn't was going to mention to it before you start, but especially horror movies are really great if you use real headphones. Um, if you don't have, if you're not in a like a 5.1 situation, put on some headphones. It's
Yeah.
pretty awesome. Anyway,
Yeah.
what's up, Katie? How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you. How's it going for you?
I'm good. It's been a busy weekend. I've been meaning to do this for Cruella for a while, so we're gonna follow up with that one, but for the next video.
I had a great weekend, couple days of getting back into the movie theater, which
Oh
was
God, I'm jonesing.
I have
Did
mixed feelings about it, to be quite honest.
I
So
was
we'll
like, I
get
see
that.
everyone I know is going. Is just like, okay, if I wear a mask and I go like to a Wednesday night after work when nobody's in there, uh, and it's more just for my own sanity. Like being around people's weird now, but
Oh, I know. Yeah. I'm fully vaccinated. I have been for I think
me too
like
since the early
yeah.
March. Yeah,
Yeah, same. So and here in Arizona, um and in Flagstaff specifically, the mask mandates have been lifted. So a lot of
here too.
businesses
Yeah,
are if you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear one.
I
So
don't know what it's like
I'm
over
very
there, but
happy about that.
it's been kind of like Mad Max down here for most of the pandemic. Where
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
that's terrible. But we're numbers are looking we're the lowest we've been since last March, which is promising as far as daily
I
cases
believe.
and stuff.
Yeah. So it was I guess we can start with movie theater since you watch yours on laptop
Mhm.
at home. I watched mine in the theater
Not
and
entirely at home. I started at during my lunch break on Friday, and then
okay.
didn't get to finish it until about 5 minutes ago. So, but yeah, yeah,
Right. Well, it's good. It's fresh. That's the good thing.
yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, absolutely. I would wear headphones with any kind of film that is very sound specific. The horror genre is definitely one of those. Um, if you don't have a good sound system at home, or if you're not in a movie theater, just plug some in. I will say at the movie theater. So here's how this went down. We are going to be talking about The Conjuring today.
Right.
I think later we'll be talking about Cruella in a different video, but I started my movie going experience. That's been like my theme for the week. It was really nice to get back into it. But I saw A Quiet Place 2 on Monday night. And
Nice.
then
I want to go so bad.
it's really good. It's really good. And then I saw Conjuring on Friday night. And then last night, Saturday night, I saw Cruella. So I saw them all in theaters. They were three very different experiences. I had different things happen to me, like audience wise, in each one of them. So it was really
Sounds
jarring
like
to,
there's some stories there.
oh, yeah, a little
Those
bit.
people being rude after not being
Yeah.
around for a while. Yeah.
And just being weird. So we're talking about Conjuring. So I'll
Sure.
start there.
Go ahead.
Um, Conjuring was the second one I saw. And actually, it was probably the most well-behaved audience, which I was a little like
Was the
surprised at.
theater pretty full? Or was it like over half
Theater
or
was
so?
full.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
theater was packed. There's still distancing seats and stuff like
Okay.
that. So it was as packed as it was allowed to be. And when I saw Quiet Place, we actually had some horrible teenagers. And I get it. Like I was one of them at one point in the
I mean,
theater.
I like to cheer. You know, like I don't talk over the movie, but if something cool happens, like I'm that asshole yelling in the third row. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? So
yeah, like, that's fine. But like slapping your flip flops and running in and out of the theater and giggling and just being like hooligans. I
disruptive.
sound like an
Yeah.
80-year-old. I am at heart, honestly. But it was just like, it was very distracting, for the kind of movie that was supposed to be. So when I saw Conjuring, it was totally different. It was packed and people were very well behaved. Even the teenagers
Nice.
sitting behind me, they were a little like chatty before it started. So I was really concerned because I'm so like I have to be able to
Like,
focus.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
we're old
Um,
people, Katie.
I know. I was like, oh, now I'm here. But they were great. They were really well behaved and they added to the experience. And actually, there's a couple of jokes in the movie, that they try to play. And Patrick Wilson just does it so well. I think I
It's
would
true.
love to see him in a comedy just because there are little like zingers here and there, which I was surprised at. But the audience was really receptive to it and nobody was angry that people were into it.
Right.
It was actually more of a theater collective experience than A Quiet Place too.
Good.
So I was really surprised by that. But what was your viewing experience like for this? What kind of impressions?
Unfortunately, I watched half the movie and then I watched the second half much later, so that probably didn't do me any favors. But it was it generally very good. There's concerned that there's a new director,
Mhm.
and he was. Did you see The Curse of La Llorona?
I didn't, but I'm familiar with the story.
Yeah, it's
It's
the
based off
same
of, and I've
director,
seen.
Michael Che, and that was La Llorona's not good, but this was it's
Right. That's probably why I didn't see it. Like I've seen all the other Conjuring to my knowledge.
and
And
there's quite a
actually,
few. I
I
was
binged them all a couple months
the
ago.
actual yes. I had only seen until recent. I want to say until October, September, October last year. I had only seen the first one, which I
Mm.
liked. But some podcasters that I follow they watched they watched all the movies in release order and kind of and their rankings are whack, but they're fun. They're over kind of funny. They're really they crack jokes and they have a good time. So I watched all the movies through with them. Um, Conjuring and Conjuring 2 definitely stand above the pack in my opinion. But like
Yes.
um
Yeah.
that's not to say there aren't gems. Like I was blown away by Annabelle Creation. It's
Mm.
the first Annabelle's terrible. Annabelle Creation's fantastic. Um,
Annabelle just freaks me out. I
it's
recently
creepy doll eyes.
Annabelle isn't at Zach Bagans Museum in Vegas, but so for folks that don't know, Flagstaff, Arizona is only a couple hours away from Vegas. So
Okay,
I actually met up with my best friend in Vegas. She's a flight attendant. So met up with her in Vegas and we went to Zach Bagans' haunted museum. I foolishly thought that it would be like an actual museum. I love museums.
me too.
And no, it was very much an attraction kind of thing, but with enough creepy dolls to fulfill any of my Annabelle needs
Nice.
forever. So I'm kind of turned off by Annabelle just because of my own like
Right.
superstitions. Like I'm like, okay, no, that's enough for me.
The first Annabelle movie, it's like definitely a vibe of like, why did they
Yeah.
make this? You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
A
But
cash
it's
grab.
no, yeah, and it's but no, yeah, and I actually really enjoyed Annabelle Creation. It's unique and it's
Yeah.
got a really cool vibe about it.
Yeah,
But
no, I've seen that. I'm remembering like the opening sequence and things like that. But the Conjuring specifically, the core,
the
I
core,
guess it's a
yeah,
trilogy now, is what really interests me. Um, because, and I don't know how many audiences are aware of all of the backstory behind the
the
story
Warrens.
screenplay, right? But Ed and
These
Lorraine
are that's a real like these are real people, and like I laugh at the occult. I believe something happened that somebody believes happened, but a lot of the stuff is dramatized for the movie, absolutely. But no, yeah,
Oh,
the
absolutely.
Warrens they were real and were professional
Mhm.
paranormal investigators. So yeah, you're the one in the know. I'm just filling it in for the viewers. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah. So Ed and Lorraine Warren are titans. I mean, Ed died in 2006, and
Yeah,
I'll come back to that later. And Lorraine Warren died just a few years ago, but they are a really large part of the resurgence of what became modern
right.
ghost hunting and paranormal exploration throughout like the 60s and 70s into the 80s. And there are a lot of shows on, so much programming now on something like sci-fi or travel channel. And this is all I watch. So, like that's really the bulk of all I watch. My brother is so annoyed because that's all my mother and I watch. Anyway, so there's shows out like the Holzer files, which detail the investigations of Hans Holzer, who was like
Okay.
America's first ghost hunter. And
Yeah.
Ed and Lorraine Warren were much more onto the religious demonology side of the investigation, which is why it's so sensationalized,
Right.
right? So there's actually a really interesting episode of a show called Kindred Spirits with top, like leading famous paranormal investigators, Amy Bruni and Adam Berry. And they go to the Perrins Conjuring house from the first Conjuring movie and investigate it. And Amy makes a really important statement that I'm glad they left into the cut of the episode, saying that it's become so famous recently because of the first Conjuring movie, but there's so much that happened that is sensationalized for the screen specifically and how they can film it. And there's a degree of, you know, these things are part of a truth that,
Right.
you know, was recorded in some way, but these are films first and foremost, right? So I think that's the important takeaway going into something like The Conjuring, right?
It is designed for entertainment. But is, you know,
Exactly.
some part of it was based on some kind of eyewitness account, but
Right. Yeah. And so in The Conjuring 3, there in the opening sequence of the exorcism, there is a reference to the recording, right? And you get to see what that recording would look like, even though it's still the actors, you know,
right.
playing the scene. But it's because they did film their investigations and exorcisms and they recorded all of these things in real life. You know, these are housed somewhere, I'm assuming in the possession of Janet Warren, but they could also be in the protective archival care of somebody.
Is she the daughter, Janet Warren?
Yes.
Is she
Yeah.
their daughter was in one of the other movies, but is did
She
not
was
appear in this one, right? Yeah,
he was featured very briefly a couple of times
because
in
she keeps trying to touch the doll.
yeah. But she came up like a few times, like in the hospital scenes in this third one.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So I bring it up just because this movie really shifts gears into the occult versus the paranormal. And there is a difference. Paranormal is more ghosty, for lack of a better term. And there's a little bit more of like a scientific method to how paranormal investigators go about documenting their evidence, right? So that was the direction of the first two films, right? And it was, even though there's exorcisms and there's like weird things, it was very much more about here's this thing, we have to document it happening. How do we get rid of it? Right. In this film, we have occult worshippers, and I know that the Satanist community will have issues with this film just because they have a whole campaign about this is not what Satanism is. I'm not going to go into any of that because I don't know enough about it.
Right.
But it's safe to say that this film is very much playing into the tropes of Satan is bad, the devil made me do it, i.e., the name of the film. And there are people in this world that can be responsible for paranormal things happening. And so that's where the occult comes in. So I think making the distinction of this is fiction and not entirely a true story is really important here, because if folks go into seeing this movie thinking that they can go casting curses on people, it's going to end badly.
Yeah, that's probably fair.
Yeah. Yeah. So what did you think about how they adapted it?
Well, I went in not knowing much about the case.
Mm-hmm.
Was I, you know, kind of cursory knowledge that I am aware of Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you know, I like to enjoy them as interesting horror films, and they
Right.
are the Conjuring movies. In my opinion, are among the better horror movies of the last decade or so.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
and it's you know subject matter not always withstanding, they're designed very effectively.
Yes.
Um, and it's that you're talking about the paranormal or the occult or the supernatural, it's really hard to get that right on screen, and or to show people things that they haven't seen before. It's like, and it's not to say that they're, the Conjuring movies, and especially The Devil Made Me Do It, are they harken back to old school horror quite a bit. And this movie, particularly in the early sections of it, it's very reminiscent of like The Exorcist. And there's even the shot of the priest in the brimmed hat with the house in the
Yeah.
back, like under the light with the house in the background. It's like, no, this
Mhm.
is straight up a shot from The Exorcist. It's um
I understand that it would be if I were directing this film, it would be very hard for me to not be influenced by things like The Exorcist.
and that's not a problem. And it's,
Right.
if does that get distracting? Because I was like, hey, look at that. There, it's a joke. Like they're poking fun, and I understood. I'll feel like a lot of other people probably will. That.
Yeah.
Um,
Even if
but
they don't
is it?
consciously understand, there is a subconscious conditioning of these images that we consume
Yes.
that makes us
Um, and
uh,
the Exorcist is
feel
that there's like that image is on the poster for The
right.
Exorcist, and that's,
Mhm.
it's in all the marketing. It's in every trailer you've ever seen. And it's using it here was a very deliberate choice. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah,
And I
and
think to the same end, um, we've kind of gone through a couple of different eras with these stories. I think the
mhm.
first one was in the 60s with the parents. I believe the second one was the 70s with, I don't remember the name of the family, but it was the one in England, which is actually, I think, the film that I prefer. I think that's my favorite of the three films. And then this one is in the 80s. So I think we're going to see, if we see any more films, I think we'll jump into the 90s and then 2000s. And I was kind of wondering if you got the same idea that I did watching the film. Because with bringing up Ed's health problems, I was feeling like they may have been trying to indicate some kind of wrapping up the story altogether.
with with probably with the Warrens, I would say so. Not so that I wouldn't. It wouldn't surprise me if we got The Conjuring 4, like especially because this one,
Mhm.
it has a kind of a little warm spot at the end, but
Mhm.
it didn't feel like a wrap up, and that could be, it's a horror movie and they want to crank the franchises for as long as they can. There are
Right.
two spin-offs currently in active development. There's The Crooked Man, which is another spin-off from The Conjuring 2,
I'm
and
looking forward to
what was the other one? Hold on. There's a sequel for The Nun that is being written,
that. Right.
which is a weird choice, but we'll allow it.
But okay.
Yeah,
I agree. Like
there.
I think that we will definitely get a Conjuring 4 if, to just keep the decades trend going. And
I
because
mean, and
they
does
also
that
have
mean, because this line of thinking is interesting? Do you think that they would involve Ed Warren's death in a movie? Because as far as I know, he didn't die on a case or anything. It was he had a lifetime illness and he just got old. But
yeah, he died in 2006.
yeah,
And he just kind of, he passed away naturally. It wasn't dramatic.
right. That's my
They
understanding.
not saying they might not try to dramatize something in a future film, but I think that when they started making these films, they had Lorraine Warren on set,
Mhm.
and
Did they edit? That's fantastic. I didn't know that.
they did, yeah. She was very involved in, I think, the first film for sure, and then I think part of the second film, and then I think she passed away somewhere in between
She died
the
in
second.
2019. I was just checking that seconds ago. Yeah,
So she would have died not shortly after the second film was released.
it's good to it's that feels good to me that they were involved, or she was involved, and was in some way she approved of these movies that are kind of taking her life's work and just debatably
Mhm.
poking fun at them. Um,
Right. And that's the thing though. That's an interesting term to use because I was going to say that I don't really think that they would make a big to do or dramatize Ed Warren's death in a film because the filmmakers and the paranormal community in general have so much respect for the
Yes, and
Warrens.
that's obvious in the movies. Like
Mhm,
and it's even more obvious. Like I'm just learning now that she was involved with the filmmaking. So that's
mhm.
um
Yeah. So I think that maybe Ed Warren's death might be an ending mark for the Conjuring films themselves, and they could continue to do plenty of spin-offs. There's plenty of material. I would not be surprised if we got some kind of Amityville House, you know,
right.
another film somewhere here and there. But just because these things are so popular and
Oh yeah.
the paranormal has never been as popular as it is now since like the late 1800s, right? The surrealist movement. So you've got like the Fox sisters and everybody going around having seances in their homes. And so there was that whole period, back in
Oh
the
yeah.
late 1800s, the turn of the century, even Arthur Conan Doyle, it's well known that he completely bought into the paranormal. He believed in it. He had seances, and it was really spurred by the death of his son. So,
Arthur Conan Doyle, who best known for Sherlock Holmes.
yes, that one.
Yeah, yeah.
um,
Just filling in for the viewers.
just making sure. Yes. um, so the topic and the interest in the paranormal in everyday life has never been more at a height since then. And now we have entirely new tools, right? We have so much
And
technology that if
I would
you ever
like
seen a
this
ghost show,
TV and like the novels have loved it forever, and there was a big bloom of horror movies in the 80s, but like
right?
even the last 15 years, like it started with Twilight and True Blood, and then we had The Walking Dead, and and those are primarily like kind of monster movies and romances, but
Monster movies,
it's
yeah.
we're
It's kind of been
leading back to what we're in a really good time for horror movies the last couple of years,
Mhm.
better than we have been in decades.
Right.
Um,
And so the occult and the paranormal, and that includes monsters and the occult and everything like that, especially in the Conjuring 3, where they have this cult of the ram or whatever it
yeah,
was. Um,
and I
including
have no idea if that has any religious. It probably has some kind of religious significance. I have no idea. Um, but yeah, there's
yeah,
definitely a lot of Satanism, or what the movie claims to be Satanism.
right.
Um, Kind of,
I am not promoting Satanism at all. I just want to say that. But I
well,
just know that it is a section of, occult
a
studies.
derivative of Christianity in
Yeah.
some way.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on in this film that I think, like you said, we had so many interesting like horror, sci-fi films in the 80s. Like specifically, I'm thinking Poltergeist,
Yeah,
like The Conjuring 3, I think harkens back to Poltergeist in just such, I don't want to say clear ways, but the feeling it evokes to me was very much of an 80s movie like
the this
Poltergeist.
the special effects during like the exorcisms and the body horror and stuff, like it's I can see the Poltergeist parallels, and it's like, what if the Poltergeist had a budget and like wasn't, because also the Poltergeist is kind of ostensibly designed for, it's a scary movie for younger people. The Conjuring is not that, so it's
Right. No.
a more mature sort of approach to like, but yeah, there's a lot of lightning and just the
And the whole being
dark intensity.
underground.
Yeah,
Yeah. I think that even in the way that they shot the film, you can speak a little more to the technicality of it, but the way that they were using editing and different shots to show Lorraine's visions and how she was figuring things out, I thought was actually quite simple. It was effective, but it was quite simple. It made me think that because this film was set in the 80s, that they were going to take quite a nostalgic approach to not only the story, but also how they wanted to execute it. What
no,
did you
and
think?
that makes total sense. And it's with the Lorraine kind of feeling stuff out specifically. It
Mhm.
is very simple. they
Yeah.
just filmed the same scenes 3 times, and
Hmm.
they did it with Vera Farmiga in the light, with Vera Farmiga in the dark, and then with the young actress who played the young version of the occultist. Um,
Right.
and
And
it
even in
really
the
just intercut
scene,
them doing the same thing in a really it
yeah, I
like
feel like they kind of put it all and I don't know if they use Premiere, but they put it all in Premiere, they synced it, and then they just,
yeah,
cut around.
just
You know, like, that's kind of
put whatever one on top that feels right at the time. Yeah, yeah.
I know that's not as simple as how they did that,
It's
but
reductive, but it's yeah,
right.
it's
But
also not like yeah.
that's how it, like that. I feel like that's how the beats were felt out for it. Like, where do we want to see this version of the scene, and how are we gonna uh use different indicators to move from each shot to the other? So, even in the scene, so that scene where she's um tuning into the two girls
Mhm.
about midway through the film, I'd say.
The
But
one in the
even
woods.
yeah, yes, in the woods. And then at the end, specifically what you were referencing in that kind of final to do with um the curse caster woman. That was interesting in the way, just because it felt so nostalgic to me. It had a little bit of a fishbowl ripply effect that was a little disorienting, but because we've been seeing that since at least the 80s,
Oh yeah.
it wasn't something that you would pick up on if you were just
And I
watching
would
it.
say like the scenes with Arnie, like at the end in the hospital bed where he squirms
Yeah,
free and he kind of floats up in that's super poltergeist. It's like absolutely, yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
it's very 80s. I agree with that completely.
And even with his priest there too, um, that priest presence there just kind of, it reminded me of the kind of just like, get the priest here and everything will be okay kind of trope that is so used. And yes, like anybody who is particularly religious, especially Catholic. I was raised Catholic when I was a child, and lots of my family are Catholic. So I understand that point of it. But even just having those simple references of, the priest giving Arnie the vial of holy water, and he makes a circle around himself in his jail cell. I mean, so there's these two parallels here of like, I'm seeing these common things play out, right?
Right.
But I think in this film, and I just thought of this, that there's a little bit of a question being drawn into the effectiveness of those methods and how they differ from the kinds of beliefs of, occultists or Satanists, right? How are they different? Because if he's casting a circle, I mean, that's a very like Wiccan thing to do, which is not Satanism. Two very different
That
things.
yes, it's funny. I've you mentioned that like that has been a criticism of some other stuff like the Sabrina show on Netflix.
Oh,
They're
which I love.
they're they're in theory Satanist witches. I don't know anything about Satanism really, but then they're the club that they join to like promote feminism and stuff. They call it Wicca, and it has Satanism and Wicca have nothing to do with each other.
Nothing at all.
Not
And
related at all.
even
Anyway,
things
that's
like
a random tangent, but no, yeah, that's things that have been
but like
criticized
even
of
like
late.
heathenism or druids,
Mhm.
anybody, pagans, there's so many different ways to blend religion nowadays that are not as taboo as they used to be.
Right.
And I just think that the way that they've done this using very simple methods in this film are very modern while feeling very retro. But that could also just be me because that's kind of my
No, I would agree with that
my
completely, and
life's area of interest.
I think that's why it uh, they are a big part of why these movies are appealing to young people. You know, like um they're we've had horror movies that have been popular, but like The Conjuring, like or The Conjuring 2 by itself made more money than like the entire Saw franchise or like 6 out of 8 Saw movies or something like that. And it's like
Yeah,
it's for a
I
reason,
think
like
because
because it has a broad appeal and they're aiming at our parents, but also us who've seen those old movies. But they're also getting the attention of the younger audience, which is,
Yeah.
that's I am not a
I,
part of anymore. I'm not sure what the difference is between you and I, but
there's not many years between us. Um, but I can definitely remember, going to the movie theaters when I was in high school, specifically high school, and like making up a ruckus. And we would just always go see the horror movies, you know. Um, Gosh, what was the one with the trunk? The horror movie with the trunk, and they had to like not open the trunk. I don't remember,
I'm
but
not
I saw
sure.
it.
I I'm
I
not
don't
sure
remember.
I saw whatever that is. Yeah, yeah.
But so many times these films are about here's something we can't explain and we're just
Right.
going to get rid of it and we're going to be scared at it, right? I think what The Conjuring does is it uses the Warrens as a vessel of education, right? Without ever condemning or elevating their Catholicism, which I think is really interesting because they were um, very religious people and they use that in their practice, right? Which is totally fine. If today paranormal investigators use and don't use their own practices within their scientific study of the paranormal, right? So I think we get a little bit more into that here, especially with the emerging technology that can be used, right? There's a great shot of Lorraine when she's taking photos of the totem at the beginning of the movie,
Mm-hmm.
and she uses her little sliding Polaroid
Yeah.
camera. And I think that is just such an interesting way to, one, put us in that world of the 80s and new tech, right? And two, bringing in that very scientific investigative way, right? Especially because they work with the police department throughout so much of this movie. It's not just the church this time, it's the police as well, which I thought was very I don't want to say balancing, but because I don't also know how much of this was planned out this deep,
Right.
people who like to talk about film will also like dive into
I
things
did like
and they're like, whoa, 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 we weren't trying to do that.
the
But I think that,
I liked the angle for sure of the, like, I'm not going to go before a grand jury and tell them that he was possessed, but I also didn't think that they didn't dig into that a whole lot. Like in the so
mhm.
it kind of was cut together in a way that something happened off screen and she suddenly just bought it.
I mean, if I was going over to dinner at the Warrens' house and they were going to show me Annabelle,
Yeah,
I would
she said they,
go.
I don't know,
Yeah,
it seemed like a
she
quick
ends up
turn to me.
wearing her. She wears her cross very prominently over her necktie. The
Mhm.
lawyer does. So I found that it was just such a something's going on here, and
Right.
so there's a really, the whole film isn't about, like you said, they didn't touch on it too much. The whole film is not about, you know, the paranormal versus the law, right? Even though they do work with law enforcement in this film, but the relationship is there, right? And so I think that this film overall is kind of ushering in a different perspective than the last two movies, which is not unwelcome. I think,
I think it's necessary if they're going to keep the
yeah,
franchise going.
yeah, I
Because I
agree.
would say there's a lot of similarities between the first two Conjuring movies, and this one's a little bit different.
Yes, absolutely. I think that they need to be a little careful moving forward about how they continue portraying different um, aspects of the occult and paranormal. I understand the need for horror. Like the whole occult angle in this film is very intense and it works well. But I think that this film got to be a little more one-sided with the Warren's perspective of religion playing into it so much. And
I'd
the other
agree
two,
with that. There isn't as much to it as there was in certainly the
yeah,
Conjuring 2, but the first one also.
yeah, I think that the other two films did a really good job at respecting all different kinds of interest in paranormal, whether it be religious, scientific, or spiritual, or anything else. And by religious, I mean specifically like Christianity and Catholicism. If they want to keep being able to kind of balance out those ideas and suspense, I think this film kind of put anything else other than Christianity and Catholicism on the chopping block. And I think that the film suffered from it a little bit.
Mhm.
But I also think that it does help play into that vintage feel that this film.
I'd agree with that, and I don't think it's a bad choice necessarily. They did that with this one, and I think they need to find something else for the next movie.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. And then I think they need to bring in maybe a third voice, right? Like another investigator. I know it's all about the Warrens, as it should be. Like I love how those real people have been characterized. I love the
right.
people who play. I think they do it really well. But I think that to move forward and to make sure that everything is covered in a very interesting, suspenseful way, a third party voice, a way of thinking needs to be brought in. That wasn't quite done with the police officers in the film
I agree with
or
that.
even lawyers, because it's so will make you believe, right? So I think that bringing in somebody else from a different school of thought, they'll be going into the 90s next, so maybe they'll have some up and coming paranormal investigators or something,
Do you
So
know of a case they did in the '90s that might make an
I
interesting
don't,
movie?
I don't. I'm not very well versed in their cases, like one by one.
Oh,
I
good.
think that just based on how the films are kind of commenting on development of their practice,
Hmm. I mean, and that's
that more tech in there. And I
it.
think that
It's.
whatever
I
they
think
end up
it
doing.
is beneficial because it's kind of the way other people react to them is very different in each movie. Even I think the first two Conjuring movies are very similar, but the way other people are reacting to the concepts of possession and stuff feels different in each one of them, and that's just it's because they're very smart about the time they're setting their movies. Like it's on purpose and it's done well. Like these
Yeah.
movies are made by talented people, and
Oh,
they know what they're
absolutely.
talking about. It's not
Yeah.
it's
I
not
thought the
schlock.
movie was
Yeah,
I thought it was filmed well. I thought it was edited well. And I thought that
I like that it
specifically
was
this
short. There was the Conjuring 2. My biggest complaint with it is that it goes on about 20 minutes too long, in my opinion. But
I love that one though. I think I don't know why. But I love that flooding basement sequence of
yeah,
the Lost film. So I don't know. I mean, maybe they shouldn't have had to go all the way down to the train station and then come back. but,
that's fair.
but whatever. But I thought it was done really well. And I actually made a note because I don't know how many people would pick up on this if it was
Sure, yeah,
just me, you know, but they have the whole room of the Warrens, like paranormal occult collection,
right.
their haunted items museum, basically. Um, and so I saw something in there that I was like, is that what I think it is? Probably not, but maybe. So the production designer was Jennifer Spence, and she's done a lot of like horror
Hmm.
suspense films, right? And the actor that plays Ed Warren is Patrick Wilson. And
Yes,
I've known who he is for a long time. So when he started doing Conjuring movies, I was like, what? I'm like, him doing that? Because I first knew him when
Phantom
I
of the
was a
Opera.
kid. Yes. I mean, my mother is a huge I mean that whole side of our family is very theater appreciative, which I appreciate because that was my undergraduate degree. So I've been familiar with and watched Phantom since I was young, right? Like I remember the day, well, not the day specifically, but like the occasion when I no longer had to look away at the strangling scene.
Right.
I was like, yes. Anyway, so I know who Patrick Wilson is, and he plays one of the main characters in Phantom of the Opera, Raoul. And so at the end of that film, there's a whole poignant shot about this like monkey cymbal playing little thing, and they have the same kind of thing but playing the accordion very prominently placed at the very end when Patrick Wilson is like putting that like altar cup in his little house museum. And so I saw that and I was like, is the production designer really that good? Or am I
It's got to
just
be
a
on
little
purpose. No, yeah.
neurotic? I'm like, it can't not be on purpose. It can't not be. So anyway, just enough. If that was a thing to Jennifer Spence, I say, well done. And then that just tells me that there's so much detail that's gone into the research and how they want to do these films that makes me, want to give the bad rep the film gives the occult a pass. Like, I'll give it a pass if they have a plan later on to like make something out of it. I thought it was good. I thought it was done well. I thought it was interesting. I did not think it held up to the first two.
Yes, I knew we were going to get there, and I agree with that. I don't know if it's a subject matter thing or the it's not as well directed in, like, certainly in the in between the scary stuff. Like, it's very
Right.
they're all very exposition heavy, but it bothered me more in this one, which is interesting because it's also shorter than the other two. And that's never a good thing. This is like it
Right.
you there's a lot you're dealing with anything supernatural. There's a lot of explaining you have to do, or it just doesn't work. But there's the who knows.
And that might be something they have to think about later
It
on.
is.
Each one of these cases is going to have a lot of exposition just to get them familiar. The audience is familiar with the case, right? And what's happening. But in this plot specifically, you are so on the nose because they, when they get into, well, there's other people that have been having issues with this problem. They have to go entirely back and like backtrack
Right.
into a new case and figure it out before we can keep going with the main plot. And I think that slowed it down. And it was in those sequences that I felt like they were really harkening back to some 80s nostalgia kind of filmmaking.
Oh yeah.
Not that it's bad. I just think it slowed it down. I think you're absolutely right that the exposition is just
It's
too
just a
much.
lot. Yeah. Then
Yeah.
how much is too much? I wouldn't say that the movie was boring. So that helps. It's just a lot of work. It's a lot to remember. Um,
And here's the other thing that I just remembered. I should have made a note about this, like right when I thought of it in the theater. But I literally, because this is exactly to your point, I was literally watching this film at one point, getting about midway through, saying, well, I would cut this and I would cut straight to that. And I would leave that on the floor and I would jump straight to this shot instead of, the 10 seconds leading up to it, just because it slows it down. The amount of like establishing shots in this film is amazing.
yes,
I mean,
you
it
are
really
absolutely
is.
right.
Go back to about like the middle of the film and just like scroll through it. I mean, I swear to God, at least a third of it is establishing shots. Every time we go from the hospital to the prison to the Warren's house to a police station to a
You don't need
whatever.
one every time, especially if it's a place.
Exactly.
Especially if it's a place you've been to before.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. Because there's the one specifically I'm thinking of, like in the prison. They go back to the prison. We've been there before a couple of times. We know Arnie is in jail. We get it. We know. But there's still this huge establishing shot of the entire facility, like bird's eye view, like helicopter, whatever. And then it cuts to like a pan of like I think a security guard, and then to Arnie's cell, and then to Arnie. Like it cuts to Arnie in his cell from all these other shots. And I'm like, you could have just gone straight to Arnie, or like given me his cell, like the panning onto the cell without all the security guard and telling me where I am, and then to Arnie.
You
Easily
only
would
need
have
to
cut
show all
like
that stuff again is if, like something about his status quo has changed, and it really has not. He's still locked in a
No.
cell. He's still surrounded by security. He's in
Yeah.
jail and it sucks. And
And
I
he's
just,
having a horrible time of it. Yeah, like we get it.
oh,
And
that's
then
funny.
later on in the scene, it becomes important because Lorraine figures out that she can see and manipulate the person who is pulling the strings, so to
Right.
say. And that's why it's important. I hate to say this, but Arnie's not important. He's really not.
He's definitely secondary to what's actually going on. That's true.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, he has this whole, I mean, I guess we're spoiling. So he has this
Yeah,
whole
yeah,
thing,
sure.
like the curse caster cult lady, Ela, is trying to get him to kill himself. And so, that's where we get the whole drawing of the holy water circle in his cell. And then she uses the glass of that and makes him break it to try and kill himself. Well, okay, but I don't need all this extra fluff in there to get me to that point. Like, I know that Arnie is under the influence of many different things going on. He's got his own emotional and psychological stress. He's got the emotional and psychological stress of the person that is manipulating him, and then he's got everything else going on in between, right? So, like, I get that. It's not a hard leap to take, especially when they've already told us that Ela wants Arnie to kill himself for a ritual. Like, we get it. So I think that sequence is just edited oddly. Like, it's not bad, it flows. If you're just sitting there watching it and you're not
It's just
reading.
too much. Like, and it's not. These movies are not known for subtlety, right? So it's just, yeah.
No.
Um,
So really, if that sequence could be re-edited to emphasize Lorraine and her development as a psychic and paranormal hunter. I don't know. This one's really not about the paranormal very much as it is about the occult. If it could be just re-edited to emphasize Lorraine and what the Warrens together are having to figure out, I think it would work much better. But
I
that's just one example.
I'd probably agree with that. I think Arnie is because we know we love the Warrens, but like they're they only get involved when it's hurting somebody else. So it's
Mhm.
I think Arnie is important overall, and I think it adds to like the near the end when they're getting rid of the demon or forcing the when they were breaking the curse is what they were really doing.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
intercutting in at least in the end sequence, uh, Lorraine and Ed with Arnie in the hospital. Um, I think it worked really well. And
Mhm.
it's definitely hard to ignore the poltergeist the poltergeist like stuff on Arnie's side of it, but it's a reminder that it's bigger than just Ed and Lorraine.
Yeah, I
Now,
totally agree.
and it's not to say that there are changes that can be made because he's swinging a sledgehammer at his wife, and that's kind of that's horrifying. Um,
It was a little, speaking of like references, it was a little like The Shining.
a little bit, yeah. That's absolutely that's true too.
That was late 70s, I think. Yeah.
Um, so they probably could have leaned more heavily in the Warrens' direction, but I think it made for a thrilling ending, and then
Yeah.
I was really into it all the way up until they showed the demon version of the occultist. She was just like the occultist with goofy teeth, and it was all right.
Yeah.
That was lame. I didn't need that, but it's
I just need her to like disappear. Like, we get it. She's
yeah.
done. You know.
Or we could have just seen the occultist get mutilated from Ed and Lorraine's perspective. We didn't need to see the demon.
Yeah. That'd be interesting. I think that's where this one kind of lost its way because, you know, for most of the first two films, a lot of the events are from the Warrens' perspective. At least when they enter the scene,
Mhm.
right? Like, I'm thinking in the second film we get a lot of information of what the family is going through from the family itself, especially Janet's perspective. Was it Janet? I don't remember. Was
I think
Janet the
so.
daughter or
Yeah.
Janet the kid in the second film?
Well,
Maybe it was the
both of the first two movies, they suffer from an abundance of children. Like
yeah,
the families that they focus on, they all have like 7 little girls. Um, which is
yeah.
it's just
The
they
parents had seven,
partway
yeah.
partway through the movie, they all just kind of blend together. So it's
So I think I fudged their daughter's name at the beginning because I'm pretty sure that the girl's name that's possessed in the second film is Janet. Anyway, so we see a lot from like Janet's perspective and the family's perspective in that second
yes, Janet.
film.
I'm on the Wikipedia. Yeah, so Janet is the possession victim in The Conjuring 2.
Okay. So but you know, when the Warrens get there, it becomes about their process, right? So I didn't feel like this film was really all about their process and how they integrate themselves into it because there were so many locations, so many different people, and so many different plot points.
Mhm.
You know, I felt like
And
it was a
it's more like they're, not to say that her supernatural abilities aren't a useful tool, but no, yeah, like it was all happenstance, or it's
let's go figure
yeah,
this
let's
out.
go
We'll
find
see
the
what
thing, and
happens.
she touches the thing, and then she's just, oh, I need to go over here and touch this other thing. I was like, there, it wasn't very detective kind of, if investigative is what I'm
I
trying to
would
say.
have
Yeah, it's just
loved
like
that.
they're not using their education to figure this out. They're using they're getting lucky almost. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So it's like if
which is fine, you know, but I just wish that maybe they had a couple of people on set to maybe make that all more a little believable because my take on that whole thing, she does like you said, she goes from place to place holding different people's hands or ground or whatever. The thing I got that I thought of literally in the middle of the theater was that's not how the force works.
that's fantastic.
You know, like maybe it works a little bit like that for some folks, but
And it's not how it
generally
worked in the other movies. Like she
that is
in
a good point.
it's it in the other ones, it was like, it was certainly present, but it was more like a feeling.
It was intuitive. Yeah,
Yeah, and
exactly.
we didn't get so much of these just like overt visions she's having.
Well, that's, you know, in the paranormal and like psychic communities, psychics, I'm so glad, are being more and more credited in, you know, the paranormal investigation setting, right? It's not taboo anymore to use a medium or a psychic. There are differences, you
Right.
know, and so that's, I'm only bringing that up because intuitive is also one of those differences. So you can be intuitive without being a medium, you know, and all different kinds of things. So that is exactly, I'm so glad you used the word feeling because that is really kind of how intuitives work. And I feel very much that that's how Lorraine Warren probably operated in real life. And because she was a part of those first two films, I
And
think that
they did a little bit with it, which they're sitting in the police station, and he shows her 3 knives and is like, pick the murder weapon, like as like it's kind of goofy, but it's it's more like what it was in the other movies. Like it's
exactly, yes,
and Ed points like they're turning her into a parlor trick and they're making fun of her, but it's
yeah.
if
I was gonna
it's that
say,
kind of thing could have been more interesting, but it's also it's more psychologically interesting, not as much visually interesting.
I'm so glad that's how you've, you know, come around to all of that with the film, you know, in between like the kitschy part of her visions and the
And I know,
intuitiveness.
not to say that, I mean no disrespect to Lorraine.
Oh no, I know,
It's
because what
the
you
police
said was
officers think it's a
completely
joke.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what that
What
when
you
I,
said was so
yeah.
right. I mean, that whole knife thing, I was gonna say was like the most believable part of it for me or
she
even
sits
maybe
on it for a second and then she says it's this one, and that's closer to what it was like in the other movies.
people who are intuitive or um well, here's the thing, everybody's intuitive. Everybody can, delve into that if they want to and develop an ability. But people who are naturally just like more open to it or more intuitive, um, have practice or do practice their intuition skills by doing things like that, you know, like pick out one of three, or some like on TikTok. I know that there's a lot of videos that are like grayscaled out. And then it's like, I've seen one that's like, choose the red candle, or what number am I going to pull? And so people will test their
I don't
intuition
know.
that way.
I can do card tricks. That's about
But people do that. And that's why I think that that whole pick the knife sequence was the most believable and the most, I guess, in line with the other two films.
yeah, for sure.
Not to say that they want to have more of a vision element to this film isn't unfound. I think it is very much a conduit to getting their kind of like 80s throwbacks, I think that works well just in terms of, using the decade as an inspiration. Because when we're kind of in Lorraine and Ela's weird connection psychic head, it feels very much like a ghost lurking in the house, kind of like
Right.
poltergeist seeing things from the thing you can't see's perspective, So, I mean, is it in line with the other two films? No. Do I understand why they would want to play that up? Yes, because of where we are and when. Do I think it works? No. I personally just like, no.
It pushes it more into like schlocky terror, like like Poltergeist is a schlocky '80s movie, um, and
Yeah.
it's just a little upsetting because the first two movies were much more than that, and that's and ultimately I don't feel like this one had very much to say. Um, I enjoyed it, it was fun,
Ironic.
but
It just seems ironic because the first two films, they are fantastical, right? But they're based on true stories, like this one is, but they feel so much more grounded in reality
right.
than this one, which I think is weird. Like, I don't know where that went wrong. I think it might have been in the vision.
And that's not to say, because there are definitely physical objects moving and this wet weather happening at weird time, all that stuff is present in the other movies too, so it's not,
yeah
it just doesn't, for some reason it doesn't work as well. And maybe it's because this one's not James Wan, but
no, I think James Wan did direct it, didn't he?
No, this one's Michael Chapes. It's the director that did The Curse of La Llorona.
Oh, okay. Yes. Okay, I must have
James
like
Wan's a producer.
produced by James Wan, and I was like, it's James Wan. Okay, that makes sense then. I think maybe they used the director they did because of the other spin-off movie, La Llorona. And maybe they're trying to build
James
that
Wan's
up.
making Aquaman money. He's got other things. He's got other stuff going on.
Well, then here's the thing. I was going to try and give James Wan some credit. I really like his Conjuring movies. I did not like Aquaman because he did the first one, right?
Yeah, it's not good, but I love it.
Oh, that'll have to be a different discussion. We might have touched on that in our last.
Maybe.
And now he's doing the second one. I'm just so kind of
I was interested in the Trench movie, and that got canned. So that's
I think James Wan does a really good job with suspense. I think he does a really good job.
And it's suspense versus surprise. That's always a line to walk with horror movies. And the Conjuring movies do it very well.
I think that's a really good distinction and way to describe why this film feels different. The other two are about suspense. This one is about surprise.
And it's more gross out kind of stuff in this one for sure. Like
Oh, yeah,
I mean, the body horror, like the contortion stuff, like in general, I
that's
would
great.
say is effective, but it's also, it's a different kind of movie than the other
Yeah,
Conjuring movies. And
yeah.
then there was like the naked fat guy in this one, which was a little
It was weird.
a,
It
a,
was weird. It
a,
was weird.
a little bit different choice, but
If they didn't need that. I mean, really? I mean, okay, so they have this like what? Like reanimated zombie dude in
yeah,
the
he's a guy. The When they first encountered him, he was a guy in the coroner's office, and then like he
yeah.
somehow appeared somewhere else, either in person or as a hallucination, um,
Yeah. So
or as
somehow, no, I
a
think it was
demonic
like an
presence.
in-person thing
Yeah,
because he like went to go attack Lorraine and then Ed pulls her out the way and then he like hits the table and like falls. So I think it was like a real like corporeal being.
yeah. And
Which
how did
turns
he
it into
get
a
there was
whole other
my
monster
question.
aspect.
Anyway, um,
Yeah, I just don't know why they couldn't have made it like a extension of Lorraine's vision,
I agree.
or like given it over to Ed somehow. I don't know, just made it more in line with those abilities that they were already exploring instead of introducing a zombie aspect to this possession movie, this possession occult movie. I don't know.
Reanimating dead people.
Yeah, it was just kind of a weird thing thrown in. I'm glad we mentioned that because that whole sequence was just odd to me. Like I understood the need for her to like understand what happened to the girls. I didn't understand the need to bring in a whole other morgue element. We're already in a morgue,
If
regardless of
something was going to be reanimated, why not the person that she was already interacting with?
good point. I don't know.
And
I
that's
don't
anywho. I
know.
I liked the movie. It's fine. It's all right. I liked the way it kind of wrapped up at the end. The Arnie got to marry Debbie, and then they Ed builds Lorraine the gazebo like from when they met. It's super adorable. Uh,
All I could think of, oh my, I hope you appreciate this, but all
sure.
I could think of whenever that damn gazebo came up was John Mulaney saying, "It's a gazebo."
Awesome.
My condolences to everyone. It's just like I couldn't get over it. I mean, that's just me. That's my baggage.
Don't
That's
worry.
what I brought into it. So it was very sweet. The ending was great. It was a little overshadowed by my John Mulaney bank of knowledge. So
It happened. Um, anyway,
it
any
happened.
thanks for hanging out. Any closing thoughts on The Conjuring 3? The Devil Made Me Do It.
Yeah, I thought The Conjuring 3 was not a letdown, but definitely not up to the thematic and storytelling standards that the first two set out. I would watch it again, but I think I would still be re-editing it in my head, which is an
One thing we didn't touch on. I
awful.
do. I always like to see John Noble in anything. He's an older Australian actor. He played the priest who lived on the farm, and
I
they
knew
go.
he was familiar.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
He's from Lord of the Rings, and he was on
Yeah.
Fringe, the TV series. Um, and he's also a an excellent voice actor if you play video games or watch cartoons. But anyway,
I do a little bit.
um,
I my pandemic obsession, which is still ongoing, has been The Witcher 3. I
nice.
cannot tell you how many
Yeah, yeah.
times I played that. Anyway,
Geralt, did you watch the Witcher show on Netflix?
of course I did. They hooked me into playing the game with Henry Cavill. I mean, of course.
Indeed.
My friend David, I think you might know David Jackson. I think maybe.
I don't know.
He was at
Probably.
Southern. He's in the
Yeah.
theater program with me, but um David is a very good friend of mine. So when the show was announced, he was like, "You gotta watch this when it comes out." I was like, "All right, whatever." And then they announced Henry Cavill, and I was like, "Definitely, I'll watch it." And then I watched it. I was like, "This is so interesting." And then I needed something to do during the pandemic, and my brother was like, "Here's my old Xbox."
Nice.
David said you should play The Witcher 3. So I did.
You should send me your Xbox gamer tag. I play Xbox every day. Anyway,
Thanks,
yeah,
my
yeah,
brothers. I'll do
fair.
it.
Yeah, yeah. I threw that out there because we hadn't mentioned John Noble, and I'm always a fan of him
Right.
when he comes up and stuff. But
Yeah.
no, yeah,
I
I mostly
love
I
it when they can translate. I thought he was very good. He had a very quiet, kind of reserved
yes,
aspect about him that made me want to know more. I knew we would come back to him in the film,
and that's
and
what
I appreciated
he
that.
exudes a very like uncomfortable calmness,
Yes.
even like, and that's just a consistent thing with it. Like in the Lord of the Rings, when he's sending his son off to like certain death, and he's just like sitting there like stuffing his face, or like he plays
Yeah.
Scarecrow in Batman Arkham Knight, the video game, and it's just a very
Okay.
um again like he's got a very like a low timbre voice, and he's just
Yeah.
very calm even
It's
when he's saying
calming, but a little
horrifying
unnerving.
things. Exactly. No, yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I
otherwise
thought that all could.
the
I've never had a problem or any complaints about any of the casting in any of the Conjuring films at
absolutely
all.
true.
I
And
think the casting is always really good. I'm always hesitant, like I was hesitant to see how well. I don't remember what his name was, but the one who played Arnie, and especially I forget her name too, the girlfriend.
if I can,
I was hesitant because I didn't know how expressive they would be able to
Arnie
be.
is played by I'm gonna mess this up. Ruari O'Connor. Interesting. That's unusual spelling there. And then Sarah Catherine Hook as Debbie Glatzel. I haven't seen either of
Right.
them in anything else, but they're both very good.
Right. I haven't either. And so I was a little apprehensive because I thought, you know, a horror movie can be a trap
Um,
for emerging actors.
Ruari O'Connor played young Henry Tudor before he became Henry VIII in the Star series The Spanish Princess,
I've been meaning
which
to
is
watch that.
it's a thing that's
That'd
on
be
the list. I
interesting.
haven't gotten there yet.
All right, all right. So I was very glad that they um did not play into the horror movie of it, and I think that all the actors are good
I
about doing that.
agree, and I think that is a weakness of a lot of these spin-offs is
Right.
they have to fill 90 minutes, so they play into horror tropes more than is
Yeah.
necessary. Like I would rather see like a frame that is a reference to The Exorcist than try to show me the same goofy horror movie that they've
Right.
tried to sell me for
Yeah.
30 years. Um,
I thought that they took on the challenge really well. I actually enjoyed their performances a lot. And that was a tall order from both of them because they kind of established the emotional stakes of the film. We've got the whole thing with Ed and Lorraine, but we're like, we know that they'll be fine. You know, even though
will
he has a
they?
hard
I
time.
don't know. Yeah, Ed got possessed in this one. That never happened before. Um,
So I thought they did really well. And especially the kid that played David.
oh yeah.
He was the actor that played young Luke in The Haunting of Hill House.
Yes, he is. David, played by Julian Hilliard, according
Yes,
to Wikipedia.
I recognized him right away. I only saw one trailer on TV for this film. So, and I didn't go too much into it. So I had no idea that this kid was back in it. And I was really glad. And I thought that he um probably had some really good training on the Hill House set. And I thought he was really great here too. So I have faith in the casting for whatever they do for the next one. I think that they have a good team with them here. And I mean, Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson are just
They're always
they're
fantastic.
so good together. I love
Yes.
them. And I love them together, which is good because
Me
they've been doing it for a while now. And I think that they've established a really good characterization between them. So I'm looking forward to the next one. Wasn't as impressed with this one as I was the last two.
I'd agree with
That's
that.
my
It's
final.
I would say it's better than most of the spin-offs, but it kind of falls behind the first two main numbered like Conjuring movies. But anyway, thanks Katie for hanging out. And
Yeah.
this is Katy Burrell. She's a film scholar at catherineburrell.com. She has a pretty awesome blog that she writes about stuff. My name's Brandon from Engine 25. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great day.